Welcome back to another episode of Cut It Out. I'm John Panazzo with ColorByte Software. Pete Wright's out traveling this week, so I'll be flying solo. So I thought today what we'd do is take a look at the interface of ImagePrint and Cut It Out, kind of go through some of the settings. The more we go over this and make it a repetitive thing, I think the more understanding you'll have behind what we're doing, what the thought process is of how all these features work together, and the power behind the integration of both the ImagePrint RIP and Cut It Out as a live interface and all the things that it's capable of doing. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and launch ImagePrint, share my screen, and we'll get into looking at the interface and what's all going on behind the scenes. So let's get going. All right, so here we are inside ImagePrint. I have Cut It Out turned on. And I'll just do, for anybody who's new, let me just go over the general interface and we'll go from left to right. We have our floating toolbar. Up here we have the XY positioning of our images, whatever image is active, as well as the size of it, width and height. Followed by three icons here, which are the shuffle icons, and this is how you maximize screen usage. And we have three of them. Tight shuffle is pretty much the only one you're going to use if you're using Cut It Out. The other shuffles are for if you're doing manual cutting with a roto trimmer or something like that, and you need to have clear horizontal and vertical cut paths to make it easier to trim your images manually. But with Cut It Out, we want to pack them as tight as we can, eliminate the amount of cuts we make on the sheet of paper to hold its integrity together. Moving on to towards the right, we have I have two image viewers up. So these are the image browsers, and this is the new one in version 12. And these image browsers can be loaded under View, Add Image Browser. Now you can have as many as you want. So if you've got a lot of screen real estate and you have files in different locations and you want to be able to view those files within the interface, you can point each of these browsers just by hitting the folder icon. You can point the browser to any file location that you want. So I have two locations open. I have some images here, and I also have some contour cut images over here that we'll be playing with during this demo. Then moving further to the right, we have what we call our dashboard. And the dashboard is basically the menu structure of ImagePrint, everything you need in one location, from your presets if you're making any of those, your printer selector. Right now I'm running red large and I'm pointing to a Canon 2100. I have an ArchD page size, which is basically 24 by 36. My profile is set to automatic. I'm using Canon Media and it pulls that profile automatically for me. If I was using a third-party media and I needed to select a profile for that media, I would just simply drop down the list and select it from my list. Moving down, layout settings. This is to control the layout engine, image properties. These are specific to each image on the page. And then our advanced settings where we have annotations, crop marks, those are off. And my Cut It Out settings is turned on. If I turn that off, you can see that the page view will change, and those margins will go from the standard margins of the Canon printer. With Cut It Out on, I have additional margins that we need for the grip rollers of the Graphtec cutter. And then we have all of our Cut It Out settings, and we'll get into those a little bit later. So that's the basic layout of the interface. All of these menus are dockable or can float freely if you have multiple monitors and you want to arrange them, to best suit your workflow. You can go ahead and do that. So now let's jump in. I'm going to take an image and I'm going to bring it on to the layout page. And what we have here, the image came in as a one-to-one view, and I'm just going to size it a little bit, kind of get it out of the way, bring it in the middle. And it's going to be hard to see, but there's a purple outline around this image. And that purple outline is actually the cut vector. So when Cut It Out is turned on, every image we bring into the interface is going to be assigned a cut vector. So regardless of what I do from a scaling standpoint, a cropping standpoint, wherever I put them, if I was going to put 2 images here on the page, one in one corner, one in another corner, hit print, load it into the cutter, each one of these images would cut out. Now that would be a huge waste of paper. So back to my shuffle button, before I get ready to print, regardless of what I've done on the page, I'm going to hit tight shuffle, and I'm going to pack these images in as tight as I can, because now if I were to print this page, it's going to stop advancing paper after I'm no longer putting ink down on the page, and it's going to cut, with a minimum margin down at the bottom so that I don't waste paper. So all of this white space here is not going to be ejected from the printer and be wasted. So that's one of the important things with Cut It Out, is when you're dealing with images, every image you bring in to the software package is automatically assigned a cut vector. Now, I don't know of any other software package that supports cutting that does it and is that simple. From there, we can work with that cut vector. So right now I'm set to a rounded rectangle. That means there's going to be rounded corners. And let me just spread this cut vector off, and we can see the rounded corner, and this is the radius of that corner. Now I can increase that radius, and we can see the radius of the corner change as I increase it. So we can dial in exactly the radius we want. If I take that spread off and I bring that cut vector back into the image or on the border of the image, now you can see this is going to cut the photograph with a rounded corner. If I don't want rounded corners, I can just go back to my straight rectangle, which is the default. And probably the last time I was cutting something, I was doing rounded edges, and so it was a sticky setting, so it stayed there. But now with my just straight rectangle, I'll go ahead and spread that out. And now we can see that each one of these images starts to spread out beyond the border of the image. And that's how Cut It Out works. Cut It Out is a global setting here. So whatever I set here is going to be applied to any image on the page. And now you can see that even though this image was butted up against the corner, when I started spreading the cut vector out, it's going to go beyond the edge of the printable area of this paper. And that's where the shuffle icons really come into to be handy, is because that all I have to do is hit that, and it automatically accounts for where those cut vectors are, and to make sure everything falls onto the page without being clipped at the time of print. So it's always important to hit tight shuffle if you're doing a lot of things and you're not careful that you're within the page boundaries or not, because Image Print itself will allow you to move things out of the page boundary, because that's the way it works, because it can split things between pages. So it's important to, before you're getting ready to print, hit one of the shuffle icons. With Cut It Out, you're going to hit the first one and allow everything to be reorganized, and it's going to maximize your use of the paper as well. So now we can see how the cut vectors are assigned and how we can control those cut vectors. So whether I want to spread that cut vector outside of the image, or I can actually, if I needed to, cut inside of the image too with a negative spread value. So that's real important to know. Looking down, we have hanger space. And so if I'm cutting images out, or I'm cutting anything where I want to cut through the paper, that's called a perforation cut. And that differs from when I'm cutting on adhesive material and I'm cutting something like a sticker or something I'm going to peel off. For that kind of cut, we call that a kiss cut. And that's when we just cut the adhesive material itself and we don't go through the backing. So in a kiss cut, the knife never lifts off of the page. Once we start cutting, it just continually drags around the cut vector. But in a perforation cut, we can't do that, because if we were to cut through the paper without leaving some sort of little tag behind, then the images would fall out while we're done cutting them, and the integrity of the sheet of paper would be such that it would just start to crumble and eventually jam inside the cutter. So we need to maintain the page integrity, and the way we do that is to lay down what we call a little hanger, and it's just a little tab, and these tabs are really small. And then when we're done cutting, if the knife is set properly, they just easily pop right out of the sheet. So for our defaults, we typically have a default of 0.750. That's a hanger every 3/4 of an inch. So this is in inches. And then the hanger size is how big the little tab is, and that's in 1/10 of a millimeter. The default would be 3, but as you get more familiar with cutting and the types of papers that you're cutting, you'll be able to take that down on certain papers. Like on most photo stocks, because there's a resin coated layer on the surface that it's kind of plasticky and holds that paper together better. We can typically take that down to 0.2 of a millimeter without any problem. So I typically cut photo papers with a setting of 0.2 of a millimeter for the actual hanger size. Moving over to the right hand side, we have some checkboxes, and the first one is image protection. And what that does is it forces the knife, let's say I had 2 images up here, and I had some curl in my paper, and I'm worried about the knife coming over and scratching the image. So with image protection, it forces the knife to follow the outline of the image and doesn't allow it to pass over the image itself. Adds a small bit of time to cutting, but it gives you some security of not having scratches in your image from the knife itself. Blind cutting mode is if we're cutting shapes and we want to cut them into pre-printed material, whether it's cardstock or we've made some form of wrapping paper or something like that, and we have shapes that we just want to cut out of that, then we just load those shapes as SVG files or PDF files, whatever you've created them in, and then we can just create the cut vectors for them, and without sending it over to the printer to be printed, the job file will just contain the cut vectors, and then we can just send them off to the cutter after we load that media that we want to cut them on. And so that's for doing just cut out of shapes of cardstocks and things like that. Really great feature. Also, if you're doing vinyl cutting, that's how you would do it. You would load your letters or logos or shapes that you're going to cut into vinyl. You would do a blind cut because there's nothing to print. We just want those cut vectors to end up in the job file, and so blind cutting is how you would do that. Then we have cut both boundaries and contours, and we'll get into that a little bit when we're doing some contouring of files to make stickers. So that's if you want to do like a 2-cut mode, you want to kiss cut the sticker shape, but then also perf cut the boundary so that you're left with an individual sticker that then you can peel off the adhesive part for. And then no sorting. This is a feature that's typically used in when you're cutting package designs for packaging and you have a lot of cuts going on, and you've designed those cuts in a particular order in Illustrator or some sort of design package, and you don't want our own sorting because we sort things on the page from hardest types of cuts to the easiest cuts, and that's typically for doing photographs. So if we want to turn that off and just follow the cut order that the file was designed at, we would check the no sorting button. The gear symbol, that's the setup for your cutter. This is where you're going to choose which cutter model you have, and this is done right when you cut it out for the first time for your cutter. That information gets stored in every job file, so you need to do that first before you do any printing for cut it out. So that's the basics of the cut it out settings, and now what we're going to do is kind of load some different images and go through contouring and layout of those so we get a feel for the sort of the workflow of how we do these things. So I've cleared my page, and before we move on to contouring, I just wanted to give an example of how powerful Cut It Out is when you combine some features of the RIP along with it. So I have a folder full of images here, and let's just say I want to do some 5x7s. I want them all to be 5x7. I'm going to go in my layout settings. I'm going to set my photo size to 5x7. We want to crop and zoom automatically, auto flow. So if we fill up the page, we want to automatically flow into a new page. And then I come up to my folder. I'm going to do a Command A to select all. And then I'm going to drag the images over to the interface. And we're going to let ImagePrint lay them out. Cut vectors are assigned automatically. And now all I have to do is go up here and hit print, and it would print out these 2 pages of 5x7s. I load them in the cutter, and it's going to cut them out perfectly, and it's literally that simple. So whether I'm doing one image or I'm doing hundreds of images, there is really no better workflow than combining the power of the ImagePrint RIP along with an integrated cutting solution. And that's the importance of it being truly integrated into the software itself. So you have all of this automation going on at once. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that. I just wanted to cover that real quick. I'm going to go back to a single page. And remember, this is our page icon up here. I'm just going to click on it once, and it jumps me back into a single page. I'm going to turn off my photo sizes, and I'll collapse layout settings because I don't need that right now. So let's look at contouring and how having contouring functions integrated into the software also makes things really easy, so that we don't have to use a design package like CorelDRAW or Illustrator or something like that in order to create shapes around images that we have. I'm going to use my little Bart Simpson image here because it works really well to illustrate the contouring. I'm going to go ahead and enlarge it a little bit just so that when we do the contour, we'll actually see it show up here nicely on the layout window. I'm going to right mouse click and choose contouring from the pop-up menu. And what this is going to do is put us into ImagePrint Cut It Out's contouring menu. And we can now see the image of Bart, and we have a couple contouring selections. We have contour or wrap. Contour is probably your most popular, where you actually want to contour the shape itself. And then we have minimum diameter, and we'll look at that in a second. Offset, again, just like Cut It Out, with the spread function, the offset allows us to offset the actual contour shape from the image itself. So what I'm going to do is raise that offset a little bit so that we'll start to see the contoured shape move away from Bart himself here. And so now we can see that shape around him. But let's just say we wanted to cut out these eyes for some reason, and we can see that they didn't actually contour. And the reason they didn't, there's what's called the minimum diameter, and that's the size of the shape that the algorithm's looking for by default. And it's set all the way up to 1. So if we have smaller items that we want to contour in the image, we would have to start dropping that value down until we see the contours come in on the shapes that we're looking for. Okay, so we've got the first eye there, and the second eye hasn't contoured yet. Now we have both eyes. And so by bringing this minimum diameter down, we can then force the algorithm to look at smaller areas to contour. But let's just say we had a big image and we had a lot of stuff going on in the image, but we only wanted the outline itself. We can turn off all interior contours just with a click of a button. So exclude interiors, we hit that, and now we're guaranteed to only have our outside shape and nothing else inside of the graphic contoured. So important to know that that's what that does. We also have some other things in here like notch, and that's Let's just say we have an image that's got a lot of like detail, like fringe or whatnot, and we don't want the contour going in and out of those little fringe areas. We can raise this notch value, which forces it to skip over. So if we look up at Bart Simpson's head here, you can see by raising this notch value, it's forcing the algorithm not to go inside of these areas of detail. So that's what the notch value does. It kind of creates a skip function where you skip over these small detailed areas. Now, when we contour something, it may be a shape that we want to use either for blind cutting or a shape that we want to use for print and cut over and over again, and we can save those shapes that we've now contoured right here. So we can save the raster and the contour. It'll save as a Photoshop file format with a path inserted into it, or we can save just the contour itself as a shape, and then we can use that shape. We can apply it to images or just use it on its own inside ImagePrint. And those are some more sort of advanced features that we'll get into down the road. Right now we just really want to cover the basics and explain what each feature does. The threshold is looking at the graphic itself, looking at the background compared to the contrast of the image. A lot of times if we're grabbing low-res images off the internet to contour or things like that, the edges can be really fuzzy, and it can create not a clean outline for the contour itself, and we may have to adjust that threshold. So if we play with the threshold, we can start seeing the contour itself change, and it'll either smooth out or even get more ragged if we go the wrong way. So you can see here going the wrong way, and you can see how jaggedy this contour is getting. So by lowering this threshold value, then I can smooth out the contour itself. And so that's what threshold does. We also have details, and that's the resolution that we bring in the graphic at, sort of the normal resolution. But if we have a high resolution image and we want to bring it in as a higher resolution for the algorithm to work on, we can set high and extreme as well, and that's just the amount of data that we're bringing in for the algorithm to work on to make its contour. Contour correction tools, we're going to get into that a little bit later when we look at how we contour a logo or text. And then we have the contour selection tool. This is where we can manually select contours, turn them off and on. And then most importantly, down at the bottom is our contour cut controls. And this is how we do a two-cut process. So right now, if I'm cutting this Bart Simpson shape to be a sticker on adhesive material, and I want that to be a kiss cut, but I also want to have a perforation cut around the boundary of the image, I'm going to turn on contour cut controls, and this allows me to set this contour specifically move down to a kiss cut. So for hanger size, I hit the down arrow until I got to 0, which turns it into a kiss cut. And then I can set the force that I want applied on the cutter. So when we're doing a two-cut mode, what we do is we always set the knife on the cutter to be able to cut through the back of the media. So we set the knife distance and the force in order to do a perforation cut. And then as a rule of thumb, about half of the force that it takes to cut through the backing is what you would use to do a kiss cut. So for example, if I've set my force on my perf cut to 24, then I'm going to come in here and set my kiss cut to 12. And now I don't have to worry about hanger space because I'm set to kiss cut and that's going to be ignored. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. Now I've applied that, and you can see here on my layout screen, you can see the contour around Bart Simpson that's going to cut. Now, once I have that contour, I can scale this image up and down all day long. That contour scales along with the image. There's nothing I have to do. Once we've designed it and it's part of that image for a contour cut, we can then freely scale it, step and repeat it, kind of do whatever we want. Very simple. So if I come in here now and I say, hold down my shift key, for example, and I step and repeat, I'm going to have a lot of stickers of Bart Simpson. But you can see I have an outline here around the entire grouping of Bart Simpsons, and that's because I haven't turned on cut both boundaries and contours yet. So right now, if I were to hit print, put it in the cutter and cut it, what it's going to do is it's going to kiss cut every one of these stickers, but it's not going to cut out each individual boundary of the sticker. So I'm going to have a sheet of stickers, not individual stickers. So what I want to do is turn on both cut boundaries and contours, and you'll see on the screen now I have the purple boundary cut lines showing me that it's going to also cut each one of these stickers out individually. So after it goes and kiss cuts all of these, it's going to go back and cut the boundaries as a perf cut, and when I pull them apart, then I'll have individual stickers. And that's what cut both boundaries and contours does. So it's a feature that you turn off and on, and if you're doing a two-cut method, then you have to make sure you're using those contour cut controls inside the contouring menu itself. So that's how we do stickers in a two-cut mode using cut both boundaries and contours. And what we're going to cover next is how we contour text or a logo so that we're not contouring each individual letter, but some design shape around all the letters. And so we're going to jump into that next, and that'll complete after that our sort of covering the basics of image print along with cut it out. All right, so this video is getting pretty long, and that's just covering the basics. We haven't even gotten into all the fancy things you can do with image print and cut it out. I'm going to go ahead and clear the page here, and we're going to take a look at how we contour a logo or text because it involves a process what we call welding. So I'm going to bring in the logo. I'm going to bring in the image print logo here. And I'm going to go ahead and scale it up so we can see it really good. And I'm going to right mouse click and go into contouring. All right, now we have the logo here, and you can see it's just comprised of individual letters. So if I were to go ahead and start contouring this, I'm going to bring in my offset and minimum diameter here. I'm going to lower it so it looks at each one of these letters. All right, so everything's contoured now, but it's not what we want, right? So we've got each of these individual letters, but what we really want is a shape around the letters. So in order to do that, we've got to force the algorithm to look at this as one whole image and not individual elements. And the way we do that is what we call welding. And what we're going to do is we're going to go down to these contour correction tools that we sort of skipped over last time, and we're going to turn it on. And I have black set, and what I'm going to simply do is draw a line connecting all of these letters together. Then I also need to connect the little dots for the eyes down to here. So now I have everything connected, and what I'm going to do is do my offset now. I'm also going to turn off interiors, and we're going to start spreading these out. and we're going to see how this shape starts to weld. And now you can see here, as little of these creases come together, the more offset I apply, the welding will start to change those and they'll combine together. So what I can do is control my offset, and I can draw some more lines if I wanted to sort of change how these things are, how the algorithm's looking inside of the different letters as they come together. And what it's doing is it's forcing now the algorithm to look at this as a whole, and then it's creating a shape around it. So now I have a nice shape flowing around my logo as my contour. And I can continue adding welds if I need to. I can change this to white and erase some areas if I've done something crooked or put a weld in where I didn't want to, and the algorithm will just keep looking at those changes. None of this is going to print. This is strictly for controlling how the algorithm's looking at the graphic as a whole. And that's as simple as it gets to doing just easy welding, forcing a shape around text and letters. Once I have it, I can save this off like we covered before. Simply hit apply. Now I have my shape for my sticker. I can size it, step and repeat it, and I have a contoured logo. And just amazing power within Cut It Out and Image Print to do these type of things that would take so much longer in a design application. I'm going to end there for covering the basics of Image Print and Cut It Out. It's getting long, and we'll cover much more detail on some of the advanced things that you can do in future videos. But for right now, we want to end it. Say thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Cut It Out.